Good evening, everybody. About a year and a half ago, I tuned into my first Libertarian Party presidential debate. And among the sea of diet Republicans and crazy people, there was one candidate that stuck out to me more than anybody else. And it wasn't the guy with the boot on his head. Candidate that stuck out to me the most was not only unafraid to tackle the tough questions, but spoke boldly and unapologetically about the tough topics. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a warm Kansas welcome to the president of the Future Freedom Foundation and the most principled libertarian that I know, Mr. Jacob Hornberger.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you all. Thank you for this opportunity. It's a great honor to be here and invited to be here to share perspectives on liberty with you. I owe you an apology. I don't know about your state convention last year. I was talking to my campaign manager, Jake Porter, and I said, how come we never went to Kansas? And he says, well, I'm not sure it's either because of COVID or because there was a bigger convention than their convention on the same weekend. And so I apologize for whatever happened there. But you know, better late than never, right? I mean, I'm here.
Just Zoom last year.
Zoom, is that what happened? Well, it's nice to be here, and it's an honor to be here. I thought about giving you a talk on how to run a political campaign or how to increase membership in the party, but those are kind of mundane things for me. At a higher level, I want to challenge you here. I want to hit you with some profound thoughts, and I gave you a warning right in advance. I'm going to create some discomfort within you, but I figure that's okay. That's my job. I figure that if I can get you to think at a higher level over at least the next 2 weeks beyond my talk, and create a little discomfort for you over the next 2 weeks, I will have done my job. Now, I want to begin this by asking you a series of questions. Question 1. Why are you here? What are you doing here? You spent the whole day with Robert's Rules of Orders, motions, amendments, elections. It's a beautiful spring day out, and you're inside here. Why? Why are you a member of this party? Why do you devote your time, your efforts, your money to this party? Taking it to a higher level. What's your life about? What do you want out of life? And I suspect that my answer to at least the first question is the same as most of you in this room. I know some of you are guests, but most of you, I think, would have the same answer that I do, is why I'm here. I want to be free. I want to live the life of a free person before I die. And the older I get, the odds are getting slimmer and slimmer. And we all know that there's libertarians who die that never experienced what it was like to live the life of genuine freedom. But I'm one of those libertarians that haven't given up. I don't care how bad things are. We know things are bad with respect to freedom, and they get worse every year. They're still getting worse every day. But you see, you never know what tomorrow's going to bring. Tomorrow could bring a catalyst that none of us can foresee. And if we give up the opportunity if that catalyst appears. It may not appear, but if it does, you have to be ready for it. And so therefore, you have to keep persevering regardless of how bad things are. Because you just never know. Now, there's one thing that distinguishes libertarians from non-libertarians. We know we're not free. We know that. Non-libertarians don't realize that. That's why they sing songs like, thank God I'm an American, because at least I know I'm free. Or they thank the troops for protecting their freedom with these foreign adventures. We know different. We have broken through to this reality that we are not free. And we're striving to be free. And this befuddles Americans, non-libertarians. They come up to us libertarians and they say, what are you all about? Well, we're fighting for freedom. What? America's a free country. Are you nuts? "Hi, you libertarians are really strange," and they walk away. They don't want to hear anything more. I'd like to share with you how I became a libertarian. I was living in my hometown of Laredo, Texas. I was practicing law. I was a young lawyer in my late 20s. A friend from junior high and high school, who was back in Laredo also, gave me a book called A Time for Truth. It was written by a man named William Simon, who had served as U.S. Treasury Secretary under the Reagan administration. And it was about economic liberty, and it had a lot of libertarian themes in there. But he was talking about restoring economic liberty to America. And after I finished the book, I gave the book back to my friend. I said, "Jack, interesting book, but what's this stuff about restoring freedom to America? We are free in America." I mean, it was like kind of strange thing this guy's saying. And then I got involved in Democratic Party politics in Laredo. I'd grown up as a Democrat. I was a liberal. I was the ACLU rep in Laredo. I was on the Legal Aid Board of Trustees. They provided free legal assistance to poor people. I believe the government should be helping the poor. I couldn't understand why anybody would object to that. It's the government's money. Why shouldn't they use it to help the poor? So I got involved in Democratic Party politics, and all my candidates that I was a candidate, but supporting candidates, they all lost. But that didn't disillusion me about politics. It was all the backbiting and the backstabbing and the double crossing, the double dealing and the betrayals. I was like stunned. And I mean, of course, that kind of thing doesn't go on in the Libertarian Party. So I walked away from politics and I went into the public library in Laredo. And I saw 4 little different colored books on the shelf. And they were called Essays on Liberty, volumes 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I pulled out volume 1, and I started thumbing through reading these essays. And I swear to you, it is a road to Damascus experience. I mean, the layers of indoctrination from the first grade in the public schools I attended was cracking apart. I was breaking through to a reality that it was phenomenal. I knew at that very moment my life was changing. And I took all 4 books home, I pored over them, I read them about 3 times. And the reason they had such a big impact on me was that they were pure, unadulterated libertarians. None of this compromise, watered down, reform stuff, vouchers, health savings accounts, none of that stuff. This was the powerful moral case for liberty, that people have a right to live their lives any way they want, so long as their conduct is peaceful. It doesn't involve the initiation of force or fraud against other human beings. Now, there was some utilitarianism in there, that the free society brings prosperity, especially for the poor, which mattered a lot to me as a liberal, that it brings mutual harmony and beneficial things to people that are cooperating in the marketplace, but mostly it was that strong, unadulterated moral case. Now, these essays had been published by the Foundation for Economic Education in New York, which ironically, 10 years later, I gave up the practice of law to go work for. But they'd been published in the 1950s, and the president of FEE at that time was a man named Leonard Read. If you'd asked Leonard in the 50s, what is the impact of your books? He would have probably said, "Oh, we've sold 5,000 or 6,000 or whatever the number is. It's been really successful," or whatever. But what he could not say is these books will find their way 20 years from now into the public library of a South Texas town and will change the course of a young lawyer's life. Couldn't say that. Now, if we move up, fast forward all the way to 1990, I'm starting the Future of Freedom Foundation with this idea in mind of presenting the pure, uncompromising case for liberty in the context of the burning issues of the day. And the methodology was based on that idea. Let's just put the ideas out in the marketplace. Let them be discovered. Because you see, what I've discovered over the years of advancing liberty is, I know this is going to shock and create a little discomfort for people. I don't think you can convince anyone of libertarianism. I really don't think so. I have family members, brothers and sisters, that are ardent conservatives. They love me. They will not give libertarianism a second thought. They've looked at it, they reject it. With knowledge, they reject it. I figure if I can't convince my own brothers and sisters of libertarianism, how am I going to convince people that are not close to me?
And so what I figured that what our job is as libertarians is not to make libertarians. It's to find libertarians. It's to find the people that are natural libertarians. There's something about libertarianism that causes you all to come to this meeting. You discover the philosophy and you're attuned to it, you're attracted to it, you like it, there's something about it. It's like, I think it's in your DNA. And I think there's people out there like us. And the idea is, how do we find those people? Well, I believe you find them by the way I found it, by presenting the pure case for liberty that impacts them. You may alienate 99 people in the process, but one is there saying, that's what I am. Where have you guys been? I'm a libertarian, that's what I feel. So that was what I was doing at FFF. And then shortly thereafter, I get a telephone call from a guy named Bill Evers. Evers was a California LP activist. This is around the early 90s. Now, I knew about the LP. When I was in Laredo and I discovered libertarianism, I contacted the Libertarian Party in Houston, and I said, would you please send me some materials? And they did. But I was so enthralled with studying about libertarianism, studying Ludwig von Mises and Bastiat, Hayek and stuff, that the politics I set aside. So I didn't really know a whole lot about the party. And in fact, I was at a convention in the 90s, speaking at a state convention, and there was a woman sitting next to me who was national director, Honey Lanham from Texas. And she was the woman, I remember her name. And when I called the state party in Houston and asked for materials, and I said to her, I said, honey, I'll sit next to her, I said, honey, do you happen to remember me calling and asking for materials? Because I said, I remember you. And she says, are you kidding? How could I forget? You were the only libertarian in a city of 100,000 people. So here I am getting this call from Bill Evers that says, I want to invite you to serve on the platform committee. And I said, no, thank you very much. Nice to be asked, but no. And he says, why? And I said, because you're a political party. You're running candidates for office. You guys are out there watering down the libertarian principles. You're watering down the message because you've got to get votes. And to get votes, you're over there watering down the principles. And that doesn't appeal to me because I don't think you're going to win liberty that way. And he says, well, have you ever read the party platform? And I said, and this is what I said to him. I said, no, and I don't need to. I can already tell you it is a collection of ad hoc public policy prescriptions that just compromise, reform, that are contrary to the purity of libertarian philosophy. He says, if I send you a copy of the platform, would you read it? I said, send it on. So a few days later, I get it in the mail, and I'm reading this thing. And this is the party platform from 1988. Very much different from the party platform of today. And I'm looking at this thing, and oh my gosh, I'm stunned as I'm reading page after page. I'm incredulous. This is a pure libertarian manifesto. I mean, it was unbelievable. And I was just so shocked. So I called Evers up and I said, sorry. I said, my bad. If you'll still take me, it would be an honor to serve on the platform committee of this party. Now, I didn't ask how many members the party had. I didn't care. They could have 100 members. I didn't care. I didn't ask him how many votes did the 88 presidential candidate get. I think that was Ron Paul. I didn't care. It didn't matter to me. What mattered to me was this was a party. It was different from the other parties. That it stood for principle, that they were sticking with their principles regardless of how many members they had. Because if they were concerned about their memberships and their vote totals, it would have been reflected in the platform. So I joined up and I ended up serving 3 terms on the platform committee. It was very rewarding. But what I noticed, and what Evers noticed, is in the second 2 terms, things were shifting. People were pushing, and this was happening in the movement too, the libertarian movement. People were pushing to water down the platform, to omit things. And the argument was, it was that we're running candidates and they're getting hurt because people are seeing what we stand for. And we need to hide some of these positions. They're too extreme. And the candidates, the press is going to look at them, their opponents are looking at them, and they're getting attacked on these things. And we need to change things. Everest and me, we said, are you kidding? The platforms are our insurance policy. This is our protection against those candidates that are out there telling people that this is what libertarians stand for. This is what the party stands for. When that happens and the press comes, we can say they're off base. See, because if you don't have a platform, then each candidate's out there telling people what libertarians stand for. But over the 90s and the 2000s, there's no question, but that faction that we saw in those last two terms in the 90s, they gained sway. And they ultimately prevailed. And that's the predominant thought in this party today, that we're a political party. My favorite one is, we're not a debating society, Jacob. We're a political party. Our job is to get people elected to office. We have to be practical. We have to be pragmatic. But that wasn't the mission of the Libertarian Party in the beginning. The mission of the Libertarian Party was never to get people elected to public office. Never. When it was formed in the living room of David Nolan's house, the idea was the mission is to get the free society. That was the mission. That was the reason the party was formed. Getting people into public office was the means to achieve that end. Let me give you a modern day example of this phenomenon to show you what I'm talking about.
Sorry, I'm obsessed.
We'll get to that. South Carolina Libertarian Party. So I announced for presidential nomination, October of 2019. They're having a presidential debate, but I don't qualify because I didn't announce in advance in enough time. But I go to the debate that evening. And the first question, I think, is from Reason Magazine's the moderator. What is your position on Medicare? All the candidates give their answer. And none of them gives the answer that I would give. So I came back to my home and I put on my campaign website an article talking about the debate, talking about this question. And I said, if I had been up there, I want everybody to know, all the delegates and Libertarian Party members, I want you to know where I stand on this question. Because it's an important question. I mean, Medicare, that's huge. I said, my answer would have been abolish it immediately. And none of the other candidates said it. And then I gave my reasons for abolishing it. You know, that freedom involves the elimination of infringements on freedom. In other words, if we're striving to be free, we have to ask ourselves, what does that mean? Well, it naturally means that the state, the government, has put infringements on freedom on us. And so we have to identify what are those infringements, like the drug war, regulation, or whatever. And then we have to, our quest is to get those infringements eliminated. If all you do is reform or fix an infringement, you haven't achieved freedom at all. You've just made things a little bit better, maybe, for yourself. You know, an analogy is slavery. That if you get transported back to 1855 Alabama, and you say, okay, what should we do here? Well, one position is, oh, well, slavery's here, it's permanent, it's in the Constitution, we're not going to change it. Why run as libertarians on that platform? We're never going to get any votes, we're never going to get elected. So let's devote ourselves to reform. And so we're going to have a lobby for fewer lashings, better work conditions, more food, shorter work hours, that sort of thing. And the slaves would be probably happy with that. But there's one big problem with it. It's not freedom. It's not freedom. That in order to get freedom, you have to dismantle the infringement, the structure of slavery. And so that's my argument on Medicare. There's a massive infringement on freedom. And in order to get freedom, you have to dismantle the structure of serfdom, welfare state serfdom. That was my argument. Well, I knew the storm that I was going to. I'm not naive. I knew where the party had gone. I knew where the movement had gone. And so, well, immediately Matt Welch, the moderator, Reason Magazine, goes on the attack, which didn't surprise me. Reason and the Cato Institute have attacked me before, more than once. And he says, what Jacob's just trying to do is show he's more libertarian than other people. He's trying to show he's more hardcore. And that's the standard attack they've always used against those of us that are advancing liberty instead of reform. Because again, reform is not liberty because it leaves the infringement intact. And it's a silly attack. Because how do you measure such a thing? If you have a libertarian who's 80% libertarian and supports the drug war versus a libertarian who's 20% libertarian and opposes the drug war, who's more hardcore? Who's more libertarian? You can't measure it. But what Welch and Reason and the reform crowd has never been able to comprehend is that it all has to do with freedom. That in order to achieve freedom, you have to identify what's preventing you from being free and removing it. And how do you do that? By finding enough people that will join us in that cause, where you reach a critical mass of people that bring a shift in society. And I'm convinced that we may be closer to that critical mass than we can ever imagine. This movement's been going on for some 70 years. You just don't know. But the idea is you find people that'll join us that are committed to dismantling the infringements. I was at one of the state conventions where there was a presidential debate that I was participating in that one. And before the debate, they had a speech by a libertarian expert on healthcare. Okay, and I thought, wow, this is going to be interesting, especially after this dust-up that I had with Medicare. Oh, I didn't tell you the other part. I had a supporter that happened to read the article, and he calls me up, and he says, "What have you done?" Furious. "What have you done?" I said, "What are you talking about?" "You've got to get that article off your website immediately. Immediately." "Why?" "You're never going to get this nomination if you're calling for the abolition of Medicare. You're never going to get it. Your goose is cooked. You're done if you don't remove that article." And I just smiled. Of course I didn't. Mindset that I knew I was facing, that predominant mindset in this party. And so the libertarian guy at this other state convention, he's the healthcare expert, he's going to give a talk on healthcare. So he gets up and he says, "We all know what the libertarian position on healthcare is. A separation of healthcare in the state." Wow. I'm shocked. This guy gets it. And that was the party platform in 1988. I invite you to go look at that party platform. If you're not inspired by it, I'd be very shocked. It actually says separate healthcare and the state, which means get government entirely out of the healthcare business. Entirely. You look at the healthcare provision today, we favor a free market healthcare system. What does that even mean? It's a conservative mantra. And it's usually a mantra for health savings accounts, which is a reform that leaves Medicare and Medicaid intact. So I'm thinking, oh man, this is great. This is right before the debate when I'm going on and arguing these things. And then he says, "But." So here comes the but. The electorate's not ready to hear this. We're not going to get votes this way. We're never going to get elected this way. So we just have to accept that this is the state of free. Now, how does he know that? How does he know the electorate's not going to accept it? How do you know that in advance? I mean, was I ready for it when I read that book and when I found those four little volumes? You can't know that in advance. It's impossible to know in advance, but he apparently does. So he says, therefore, we have to settle for health savings accounts, which is a reform. It's not freedom, it's a reform. So he spends the rest of the 55 minutes showing libertarians how to make the case for health savings accounts, which isn't difficult because you're not challenging people. You're not challenging their worldview, which is Medicare and Medicaid are necessary to help the poor and the elderly and so forth. I mean, there's that mindset that if you don't have these programs and you abolish them today, freedom doesn't work. I mean, people dying in the streets and stuff. They cannot conceive that a free society really works. That there would not be people dying of illness in the streets if you abolish them today. Because freedom really does work. And so I thought, what a disaster. He had 1 hour to train libertarians on the principles of separating healthcare in the state, and he flopped them. Now, to give you another example, I happened to last year just come across a website of a person running for state house. And I was just stunned by this one. She says, "I'm a pragmatist," which means I'm practical. I'm a practical person. "I favor public schooling. And I'm the Libertarian Party candidate for state house." I'm like, oh my God. I mean, this is a massive socialist institution This is the reason people falsely believe they're free. This is where the indoctrination is. This is central planning, the core element of socialism, mandatory attendance laws, coerced taxation, regimentation, government school books, government school teachers. You couldn't find a better example of a socialist program than public schooling. And she's there saying, I'm a libertarian, we favor public schooling. That's the message she's giving. And from what not vouchers. I mean, she likes vouchers too. She favors public schooling. And from what I've heard, no pushback at all by any party official or anything. I mean, all they had to do is call her out on it and say, look, this is not what we stand for, and you're not going to say that this is what we stand for. Put on your website that this is your personal opinion, and it is contrary to the position of the Libertarian Party, and it's contrary to libertarian philosophy. I don't think they got any pushback. Sticking with healthcare, look at the pandemic. Okay, you've got all of these assaults on liberty, right? I mean, it's become a cottage industry for libertarians to knock down everything they're doing. Y'all are familiar with the board game Whack-A-Mole? The mole pops up. Okay, well, this is like pandemic Whack-A-Mole. You can't tell me to wear a mask. I'm freedom. I don't have to wear a mask if I don't want to wear a mask. It gives me carbon dioxide. Bam, whack that mole. And then you can't tell my business to lock down. This is throwing the economy into a tailspin. I got a right to run my business the way I want. Bam, whack that mole. And then, what are you talking about a vaccine passport? I'm not going to take that stupid vaccine, and I'm never going to carry a passport. Bam, whack that hole. And then how the government was managing the thing. Shortage of masks, shortage of hand sanitizer, shortage of ventilators, the chaos of vaccine distribution. Bam, 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 whack that mole. But you see, it's an endless process. It never stops. Because the government is managing health care. And so what libertarians are saying that are whacking all these moles are raising people's vision and saying, this is what we need to do, not just whack these moles, but separate healthcare in the state, get government entirely out of the healthcare business. Because it's the only way we're going to achieve freedom. By causing people to think at a higher level and finding those libertarians who agree with us. People are not going to consider an idea unless they hear it first. Now, how did we get to this point? And that's what I want to share with you, how the party and the movement, I'm talking about the party, but the movement's there too, dominated by the reformers, the reform element, the road to compromise and concealment, the road that says you can't talk about Medicare repeal. I mean, one of the joyful things I had in this conference, in this race that I did for your nomination, was watching the reaction of the reform crowd. It was like, oh my God, if Jacob's the nominee, we're going to drop back down to 1% because he's going to run as a libertarian. The biggest fear was like Social Security. He's going to call for repeal of Social Security. Oh my gosh, we're going to go back to 1%. And so today there's a fear to talk about repealing Social Security. You're supposed to couch it in terms, we're going to save Social Security. We're going to come up with these Rube Goldberg schemes of selling assets, opting out and all this stuff, and we're going to save you. You're going to get your money that you put in. But everybody is terrified to say repeal. Okay? Now, this is how we got to this place. That in the 1930s, there's the watershed period. Now, keep in mind that in the late 1800s, you had a society that was remarkable. No income tax. Get this, because Cato and Reason have attacked me on this when I point this out. No income tax, no IRS, no immigration controls, no Federal Reserve, no paper money, no gun control, no foreign interventionism, no CIA, no NSA, no massive military establishment. Pretty remarkable thing. Well, all that changes in the 30s. All that's abandoned. And then later in the 40s with the national security state that abandons and rejects the limited government republic we've been operating under. But Roosevelt adopts Social Security here. And it's a socialist program. It's imported from German socialists. That's where it originated, this idea. They bring it into existence, and conservatives were very principled at this time. They were opposed to this. They were pointing out this is a socialist program. This is changing America for the worse. This is the advent of the welfare state, which is a massive infringement on American liberty. Second only to the national security state, in my opinion. Well, conservatives were battling against this all the way up to Barry Goldwater. And Goldwater writes this book, Conscience of a Conservative, which is quite libertarian. And he's opposing the welfare state. But then he gets smashed in the '64 election. I mean, massacred by Johnson. I think he carried 1 or 2 states or something. And at that point, Republicans had some soul searching to do. He says, well, if we're going to be players in the political process, if we're going to get elected, how can we be opposing these social welfare programs? How can we be opposing the welfare state? So they threw in the towel. They said, it's more important for us to be players, to get our approval from the mainstream press, get our op-eds published. So they said, we accept the inevitability and the permanence of the welfare state. America will never give up Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, farm subsidies, education grants, the whole kit and caboodle. And then so what they said was, we'll just run our campaigns based on free market reforms. And that's what they call it, free market reforms, and free market this and free market that. Well, then they got disgruntled. Many Republicans got disgruntled with the party. Conservatives got disgruntled with the conservative movement. There was a lot of hypocrisy there, out of control spending that was being supported and so forth, monetary debauchery. So they started leaving, and guess where they started coming? They started coming into the Libertarian movement and the Libertarian Party. And at one point it becomes a flood. And there's a lot of recruiting going on too. The Libertarian Party hierarchy says, hey, membership. And they're recruiting for the Republicans. Come on into our party, coming into our party. Okay. But what happens is these Republicans and conservatives come in and they bring their baggage with them. That's the problem. They bring their baggage like borders. They're ardent supporters of immigration controls. They believe in immigration controls. And they believe in the immigration police state that comes with immigration controls. And I've seen that police state. I grew up on the border. I grew up on a farm on the Rio Grande. Border Patrol would come into our farm and bust our workers who we were hired, and without a warrant. And they could. And they have domestic highway checkpoints. This is what the immigration control system brings into existence, along with all the death and suffering. People dying of thirst on deserts in the back of 18-wheelers and crossing the Rio Grande and so forth. So they came into the movement of the party and they prevailed on libertarians to abandon this principle in favor of open borders, which is a libertarian position. And to the point to today, there's many libertarians that say, oh, we have 2 positions on immigration in the party and in the movement. There's no 2 positions. These are opposite positions. Libertarianism is a internally consistent philosophy. It doesn't embrace opposites or contradictions. When you find yourself doing that, do what Ayn Rand said, check your premises. And how do you determine which is the right one? Which is the one consistent with the libertarian non-aggression principle? Anything that's peaceful. You cross a border, that's quite peaceful. When people interfere with you with force, that's the initiation of force. But that's what happened. Then they come in and say to libertarians, you got to be practical. You want to compete against these other 2 major parties, then you've got to start watering down your message. You can't go out there calling for repeal of Medicare and Social Security. The welfare state is here to stay. You got to be practical. You got to be pragmatic. You can't be talking like this anymore. And that's what leads the road to concealment of the extreme positions. And the same thing with respect to the national security state. You look at that 1988 platform. It is clear and unequivocal. Abolish the border patrol. Abolish the immigration system. Free movements of people. The CIA. Abolish the CIA, which is the most evil agency in U.S. history. I mean, MK Ultra, drug experiments on people, state-sponsored assassinations, regime change, coups. You couldn't find anything more evil than the CIA. And that 88 platform reflected that. We favor the abolition of the CIA. It said that. And the FBI, which Truman compared to a national Gestapo. You look at the platform today, it's gone. You know, the CIA never needed to infiltrate the party to get that provision eliminated. The right-wingers that were coming into the party succeeded very well in doing that. So where are we today? Hey, we're today where there is no libertarian brand. People, you know, I get these fundraising letters from LP candidates. Send me money so I can get my message out. Why do you need to get a message out? I mean, after 50 years of this party's existence, every American should know where we stand. They don't. You know why? because we stand for a libertarian, conservative, reform-oriented mush. A mush that consists of health savings accounts, school vouchers, regulatory reform. There's even libertarians that celebrate when a libertarian-leaning conservative gets in charge of a federal agency, regulatory agency, because he's going to bring free enterprise approaches to the regulatory process. There's people that consider libertarianism a subset of conservatism. And it's justified, because it's all just a great big mush. And you've got a revolving door with Republicans coming into the party. We're like a minor league for the Republican Party. You got people just strolling in, feeling very comfortable, and then going back. But now that when they're over there, they're considered libertarian-leaning conservatives or Republicans. When they come into our party, it changes and say, well, now they're conservative-leaning libertarians. But you guys like Wayne Allen Root strolls into our party, runs. I think he was vice presidential candidate, and then strolls on back, and then disses the LP. I saw him at Freedom Fest, at the big conference that Mark Skelton runs every year. He was up there in a debate on immigration. You can imagine what his position was. And he disses the Libertarian Party, and there's no pushback. I mean, if I'd been on that stage, I'd say, look, bud, the Libertarian Party made you successful. And then you got Austin Peterson, strolls in, gets into the revolving door, goes back, and the best one was William Weld. I mean, the guy strolls on in, he's the highlight, reasons, magazines highlighted with interviews, podcasts are going on, and they're putting him as a fundraiser. I mean, there was no doubt there were people in the party hierarchy and in the movement and in the party that were looking at him to be the 2020 presidential candidate. And in fact, here's the clincher. George Will, the conservative columnist for the Washington Post, he's Mr. Conservative, writes a column that's, and he's talking about Weld. It was effectively an endorsement where he says, Weld is this perfect combination of conservatism and libertarianism. If he gets this nomination and he wins the presidency, he could save conservatism. And there's no pushback. It was like a compliment. And it's like, I'm looking at this and saying, oh my gosh, if I were to win this nomination down the road, I don't remember when it happened, the sequence of events, but I thought to myself, if they ever write an article that says, can this man say conservatism about me? I'd sue him for libel. But that's where we are today. Every libertarian's got to make a decision here. Let me tell you, this country's in bad shape. I don't need to tell you that, because of what conservatives and liberals and Republicans and Democrats have done. You got out of control spending, out of control debt. You've got inflation coming out the gazoo. You've got a monetary crisis on the horizon, the likes of which I think are going to shock a lot of people. Because this thing's been going on since 2008, this inflation business. And it's finally going to grab on, and it's going to stun a lot of people. And then you've got state-sponsored assassinations, these forever wars, giant national security establishment, torture, the drug war. This country, everywhere you look, there's a crisis. Immigration, education, healthcare, Social Security. This is what they've done. And then look at the manifestations of it. Suicide rates soaring, including among young people. What's that all about? You've got unexplained mass killings. You've got drug rates, alcoholism rates, all reflecting pretty much dysfunctionality. And there's one light shining through this darkness, and that's you. There's one light shining through this darkness, and that's libertarianism and libertarians. If there was no libertarianism and the only choice was between conservatism and liberalism, I'd be here handing out cyanide capsules. Okay? But you are the light that is shining through this darkness. Libertarianism is. And what you have to do is you have to make this light brighter and brighter and brighter. And you do that by adhering to your principles that then attracts more people, that then makes the light even brighter until we get to the point that the darkness is extinguished and we achieve this paradigm shift into a free society. This is what you have to decide. Everybody here, all you new people, I saw you raise your hands earlier, first convention, you're hit with a fork in the road. Do you want to devote your life to reform? Is that what you want out of life? Is that what life means to you, a warmed over serfdom? Is this what you want to live and die, as a warmed over serf? Or do you want to be free? Do you want to live the one life that God gave you as a free man and a free woman before you pass from this earth? Because if you do, then you gotta fight.
I figured you'd want that.
1980 Libertarian Party platform, to be abolished. She's got the whole list. Department of Energy, Environmental Protection Agency, Food and Drug Administration, OSHA, Federal Communications Commission, FTC, National Labor Relations Board, FBI, CIA, Federal Reserve, Social Security, welfare, public schools, taxation.
Yeah.
That's what I read when Bill Evers invited me to serve on the platform committee. What do you want out of your life? Why are you here? Thank you very much.